Welcome to another Southwest Desert episode, where we will recount the tragic events of the Bisbee Massacre, one of the bloodiest incidents in early Arizona history. Our story begins on a fateful evening in December 1883 in the mining town of Bisbee, Arizona. It was soon after dark on Saturday, December 8, 1883, when two men, one masked and one unmasked, entered the general store of A. Castaneda and Joe Goldwater in Bisbee. The unmasked man pointed his gun at the store's bookkeeper, Peter Dahl, demanding he raise his hands. Dahl hesitated at first, prompting the second masked bandit to also aim his revolver at the clerk. Three more masked men then entered the store, covering the customers and other employees. With multiple weapons trained on him, Goldwater quickly opened the safe. Meanwhile, two bandits had returned outside, patrolling the street with rifles. Just as Goldwater swung the safe door open, those inside heard one of the men outside shout, "Come on in here," at a passerby. The citizen replied, "No, you don't," before two gunshots rang out and the man staggered and fell dead against the Bon Ton Saloon. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan on another Southwest adventure. Please leave a like or comment. For more desert stories, hit the subscribe button. The killing of the man, later identified as Johnny Tapanier, marked the beginning of the Bisbee Massacre, a ruthless incident that would claim 3 more lives before the night was through. This was no longer a common payroll holdup. It had become deadly serious. Realizing capture would mean the noose, the bandits now fired recklessly at anyone who showed themselves on the street. The second victim that night was D.T. Smith. Earlier, Smith had been in the store but left for a nearby restaurant. Upon hearing the gunfire, he rushed outside with his pistol, only to be shot in the head before he could act. The third innocent bystander killed was Mrs. W. Roberts, a 33-year-old woman recently arrived from New York. She unknowingly stepped into the street amid the chaos and was fatally shot. James A. Nally became the fourth victim while trying to find cover from the flying bullets. Hit in the chest, Nally made it to Bob Pierce's saloon before collapsing. He succumbed to his wounds the following day. Inside the store, as the slaughter unfolded outside, Joe Goldwater emptied the safe's contents into the thieves' bags under duress. Not satisfied with their take, one bandit went to the back room where the sickly Castaneda rested, forcing him to hand over a stash of gold hidden under his pillow. Their crime complete after 5 or 6 blood-soaked minutes, the 5 outlaws raced out of the store, occasionally firing over their shoulders to deter any pursuit as they mounted their waiting horses and galloped out of town. Deputy Sheriff Bill Daniels, who moonlighted running a saloon when not upholding the law, was shooting billiards when the first shots echoed outside. Rushing to investigate, he ran into a breathless man who filled him in on the situation. As Daniels moved to respond, he was pushed back inside by a half-dozen citizens scrambling for cover. Grabbing 2 guns and enlisting another armed man, the deputy raced out the rear entrance into a gulch behind the buildings. The pair made their way to the post office before emerging onto the chaotic street. By then, the bandits were fleeing on horseback. He unloaded his gun at the retreating outlaws, but the darkness made for inaccurate shooting. Returning to Castaneda and Goldwater's store, the deputy was apprised of the robbery by Joe. Daniels hurried to the Copper Queen mine office, where a man named Ben Williams offered horses and guns to provision a posse. Back in town, a boy informed Daniels he had spotted 5 men on horseback frantically riding towards Hereford. Finding the town in disarray but managing to gather a posse, Daniels headed to Tombstone to alert the sheriff while he and another man rode to Forest's Milk Ranch seeking a trail to follow. Daniels was told a party of 5 men had passed by not long before, a promising lead. Sending for the newly formed posse, they regrouped at the ranch, camping there until sunrise. The early light revealed tracks heading off the main road. As Daniels led the posse, a man named John Heath suddenly arrived, claiming to have found a divergent set of tracks splitting off further back. Though an experienced tracker who hadn't noticed another trail, Daniels nonetheless took Heath's advice to split up and follow both paths. Heath and two others rode towards Tombstone while Daniels continued westward. An hour later, with no further sign of their quarry, suspicion crept into the deputy's mind. Something was amiss, and John Heath warranted closer scrutiny. By now, Heath had a sizable head start, so Daniels could only double back to their original trail. The posse soon encountered another group near Sulphur Springs Valley who reported seeing a lone rider that morning, watching him alter course and ride off upon spotting them. The same account was offered by a man at Soldiers' Holes later that evening. With the outlaw estimated to be a half-day's ride ahead, Daniels pressed onward after pausing to rest and water the horses. Their next stop after nightfall was White's Ranch. The rancher shared that he had seen men matching the bandits' descriptions days prior at Buckles, a neighboring ranch. With no sightings of the lone rider that day, Daniels decided to halt for the night, the trail having gone cold. Rising with the sun, Daniels and his men set out for Buckles Ranch, arriving around 10 a.m. Frank Buckle had crucial information for the posse. 4 of the 5 robbers had been there the previous Wednesday, getting their horses shod. What's more, Buckle revealed that 2 of them had visited before. One was a debonair, mustachioed man with light hair and complexion, a perfect match for Tex Howard, the unmasked leader of the gang. The second, as described, was the spitting image of none other than John Heath. The pieces fell into place for Daniels. Heath and Howard were associates predating the crime. Heath's conveniently found set of tracks served to throw the posse off the scent. John Heath was now a wanted man. Sending a rider with a hobbled horse to Tombstone with orders to have Heath apprehended if spotted, Daniels also dispatched word to Ben Williams in Bisbee to be on the lookout. Based on Buckle's account, Daniels concluded that some or all of the murderous quintet had likely fled to Mexico. Leading the posse south, they searched in vain for 3 days, checking various ranches for any sign of the killer's passage. Empty-handed, the deputy headed back to Bisbee, realizing that even if on the right track, the fugitives would already be across the border. En route, news reached him that Heath had been arrested and jailed in Tombstone. Daniels resolved to hunt down the 4 remaining bandits. After a brief respite in Bisbee, Daniels rode out once more, fortune favoring him this time. He located Dan Dowd, one of the robbers, holed up in Corralitos, Chihuahua. Brazenly disregarding the international boundary, Daniels seized Dowd and smuggled him back to Arizona, locking him up in Tombstone. The rest of the gang fell in quick succession following Dowd's capture. Bill Delaney, the second masked marauder, was apprehended in Ninas Prietas, Sonora by Mexican authorities. Dan Kelly, the third member, was recognized mid-shave by an astute barber who alerted law enforcement. Tex Howard and Red Sample, the ringleader and the final member respectively, surfaced in Clifton 5 days post-robbery, flashing their ill-gotten wealth. A distinctive double-cased gold pocket watch inscribed with the name William Clancy, identified by sharp-eyed bartender Walter Bush as part of the loot extorted from Goldwater, proved their undoing. In short order, the last 2 fugitives were jailed alongside their partners in crime. The wheels of justice turned swiftly. After a speedy trial, the captured outlaws were sentenced to hang on March 28, 1884. However, the gruesome tally of the dead and condemned sparked by Johnny Tapanier's murder was not yet complete. Focus shifted to John Heath, suspected accomplice to the robbery-turned-massacre. Trial testimony brought to light Heath's backstory. a Texas native who had arrived in Bisbee mere days before the bloodbath, entering into a saloon venture with a Mr. Waite. It was revealed that Heath and Howard, both Texans, had been partners for 3 years, drifting apart before reuniting in Clifton, Arizona. During the Clifton to Bisbee journey, their party grew to 6, joined by Bill Delaney, Dan Kelly, Red Sample, and Big Ben Dowd. The original aim split the group. Ben, Red, and York planned to push on to Mexico, while Heath intended to settle in Bisbee and go straight with a legitimate enterprise. Ultimately, ringleader Howard roped them all into his illicit scheme. Heath's level of complicity being argued, the court found him guilty as an accessory, sentencing him to 20 years in Yuma Territorial Prison, likely to his relief. But the citizens of Bisbee, robbed of 4 of their own that fateful December night, would not be placated by anything less than a life for a life. In the pre-dawn hours of February 22, 1884, an armed mob 50 strong rode from Bisbee to Tombstone. After securing a length of rope from a store, grimly co-owned by Joe Goldwater of the ravaged Mercantile, the angry vigilantes completed their grisly errand. As Tombstone awoke, John Heath's lifeless body dangled from a telephone pole, swaying in the morning breeze. The coroner's inquest would inscrutably conclude that the deceased died of emphysema of the lungs, which might have been caused by strangulation, self-inflicted or otherwise. Thus, through swift judicial process and brute street justice, the 6 men behind the bungled Bisbee payroll heist paid for their crimes, their misdeeds remembered to this day by 2 weather-beaten grave markings, one for the 5 hanged by law, the other for the one lynched by the mob, standing sentinel in Tombstone's Boot Hill Cemetery. And so concludes our retelling of the dark chapter of Arizona's territorial days, known as the Bisbee Massacre. 4 townspeople killed in a robbery gone wrong, 5 criminals hanged, and 1 alleged accomplice lynched, a total of 10 lives lost in a few bloody days in 1883. A reminder of the high cost of crime and the brutal code of frontier justice in the Wild West of old. Thank you for joining me on this desert romp. Hit the subscribe button. Please leave a like or comment. Happy trails.